What is your take on, the act for, I think you touched on it a little more, but I'll go back, having access to proper resources for people who are trying to get into recovery, and especially those of us who are Black or brown and LGBTQ?
My take on that, we always talk about equality, which is important. But what we don't talk about is equity, and I think I have said this in another interview with someone else. Equity is the other piece that goes to equality and being seen and representation and having access. You can have all the access you want, but in certain circumstances, if you don't have that equity component, what do I mean? Your own resources. So say I am dealing with substance, I'm having some challenges. 9 times out of 10, I don't have time to take off from work to go check myself into a rehab. A rehab that's going to be effective. I'm not talking about that state ran. I'm not saying anything is wrong, just their programs, their templates. I don't feel that it's intended to actually free people. It keeps people, because you get money off of that. It's a money maker. And the social work component, you can forget about that. People really don't care about individuals anymore. And so we don't have the resources to go to a rehab, go somewhere far off and, go get a wellness center, what they call them now, wellness center. Go get well, girl, take 30 days off. Bills gotta be paid. You're in school, you got a family to take care of. Or you might, if you don't have a vehicle, how you want to get there. If you don't have insurance, how you want to pay for it. A lot of times we don't have those support systems around us that will allow us to have a healthy outcome. And then I feel strongly for the institutions that we do have access to, we experience stigma and we become re-traumatized. And the retention rate or the pass rate of some people going through a program and holding on to their sobriety, those numbers, I don't hear people talking about those numbers really high. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but people I do know, have a sense of people that go in and out, which is nothing wrong with that, because they have a sense of awareness, thank God. But how come that's so high and we don't hear the stories about people that, took those programs and was able to succeed with minimal resources? And the way how it's talked about, it's still a whole lot of stigma. And then when you do have some centers, because we have some here in Albany, they're in areas where high crime, areas where you walk out the door, make a left, the weed spots right there, crack alleys right there, heroin. It's like, why would you put a rehab center right in a neighborhood on a street that's known, notorious for narcotics? There was something in the paper just about that. We have a center here in Albany. And the people around the community are starting to complain because you find needles but this is a center that's supposed to help people, get off of drugs, which they have been successful. But what about those that are working the system, or what about those that fall through the crack? Because like I said, we don't have all the components when it comes to social work. It's not an all hands on approach. It's like, nope, we're gonna suck your insurance from here, you can get your meds, you can get a case manager. If you don't comply to 1, 2, 3, then you're out of services. It's a mess. And so I'm happy and I'm blessed that I was able to do it on my own, because I can see people getting really frustrated at the roadblocks of the place, and then the stigma that's carried with you for the rest of your life, because that stuff goes in your file. When the white folks start writing, honey, that stuff goes with you. So if you go try to seek help at a hospital, that's in your record. So God forbid you fall and break your leg and you need some morphine because you have a freaking broken leg. Oh, they're substance seekers. All that said to you, and they say that. And so being in a healthcare setting, I have heard healthcare providers working with people, And so now I'm not going to come back to the hospital. And so now you have, once again, that cycle of going further and further down the rabbit hole. Anyways, I digress.
I think early on when we first had the lockdown, I mean, I remember being at our organization at Exponents and them saying we had an emergency meeting, somebody had COVID, then a participant had COVID, and we need to shut down. That was the day before the city shut down. And of course, we were very concerned because part of how people recover from, mental health, HIV, hepatitis C, addiction is by getting the support from your peers. And if we couldn't do that, what would happen to folks? So early on, we were probably one of the first in the city, at least anecdotally, this is what I've heard, that we were the fastest to respond to providing Zoom groups than any place in the city. In fact, some of our funders have asked us to do trainings with other organizations to show them what it takes and how they can do it. And so when we locked down that day, we made sure, thankfully, we had a database with everyone's contact information, and we went home and we called everybody who is active in our program. And every program did that and said, we are not going to lose touch with you just because the city is shut down. We will do phone counseling. We will do as much as we can with you so you don't feel alone, isolated, or not knowing, what to do. And I'd say within a month's period, we were up and running with Zoom groups, and we would help folks, talk them through how to get Zoom, how to, connect, and know that there was always an option to call in if they couldn't do Zoom. But we realized how important that was not to lose folks, because many more folks were reverting to more substance use because they were coping. And part of what is a trigger is the isolation. And for some folks with the anxiety that they may already have, anxiety and depression, the two really huge and more, I hate to say, commonplace issues that folks deal with, these were exacerbated. And so it was so important to keep at least that communication, at least knowing someone was on the other end of the phone or the other end of the screen, and that it became evident that as much as we can do every day, in fact, we did weekends as well, as much as we could to help folks stay connected. And most of what I heard was they were isolated. Some folks, a very rare few, started using less because they were afraid to go out and get it. But most were resorting to the comfort that the drugs gave during this time. And still today, as you have mentioned, anxiety especially has gone through the roof, and depression, post-COVID lockdown. So these are things, and not only those who have gotten COVID, but those who have just lived through that period, even if they never got it. Like I always say, for every risk factor, you need a couple of protective factors, right? Which would be the prevention piece. Yes, for many folks who maybe if you're HIV positive and you get some housing, for us in the city, it's HASA, and that's HIV/AIDS Services Administration, and you can get housing, you can get a scatter site apartment, so those apartments are scattered through regular buildings where, people live and pay X amount of rent. And there are some apartments that are dedicated for folks who are living with HIV. Now, some of those generally are not in luxury buildings in New York City, but some are beginning to be. So, but for the most part, whatever was affordable or that your benefits would pay for, many times is in an area that's drug infested. Now, drugs are everywhere, right? But it doesn't have to be out there right in the middle, like in your building. Everyone's selling on every floor of your building. and that's what happens. Some of the issues with the SROs, the single room occupancies, they're in areas where it's just, you're putting somebody with that risk factor every single day, trying not to use to the point of, God forbid, death, destruction, etc. They're trying to maybe manage their use. And if it's in your face all the time, it's very difficult. I will say, though, the protective factor is continuing through that to keep somebody engaged with their peers who are also struggling, but finding ways and things to do that keep them out of that atmosphere, and then making sure they share that with everybody so they can get advocates who can help them potentially get out of that particular drug-infested building, maybe to another building where, yes, drugs are everywhere, but they don't have to be sold knocking on your door every day. It's a shame, and it's horrible, and it's something we, as working in this field, a certain number of us really need to be not just advocating, but activists, going out there and, really getting on the steps of City Hall to affect change. And we are the voices for those who have no voice. And so it's so important, but the more protective factors you have can actually counteract some of those risk factors. But there has to be a change systemically, and having the health inequity that we have will forever precipitate those risk factors. So we must make changes systemically and in our government.
The state of the climate that we're in, and I don't mean temperature, the climate socially, people are so depressed and so angry and have so much on their plate. And a lot of people in that are, in the lower classes, they don't have the reassurance to say, hey, you don't have to do that. They don't have people to tell them, listen, there's a better way. Not everybody has, from what I'm seeing, people are really hurting. Like, underneath doing the drugs, people are dying of pain on a whole different level. And then to go outside and be judged again for being whatever. It's just like, it's an endless cycle for some people. Only a few make it out. That's why I would never do it again.
How are you maintaining sobriety?
For me, I didn't have any triggers when I used those drugs. It was just me, like I said, I wanted to do it. From having participated in sex work, in a role that I played, being able to last so long was very important. So that was something that was kind of like on my bucket list of things. Okay, if I'm going to try drugs, girl, it's going to be coke, girl, and it's going to be crystal meth. And so I did it. And so once I did it, and at the end of my struggle with crystal meth, like I said, it wasn't fun because I was now getting high alone. I wasn't participating in any sexual activity, so you're just high and not doing anything. And like I said, I was unemployed at the time, so I was literally, it was not fun. And I had so much shame. I didn't want to get caught out there because the rumors were already out there. Well, I'll say this. When I was in it, in the moment, let's say this past weekend at the club, at Boxers, downstairs in the bathroom, watching somebody light the bowl up, knowing how familiar that is, knowing what the sensation is like, knowing what the possibilities could be like after I did, maybe I would be horny or really creative or really want to just go. I can do that on my own. The stuff that I was trying to feel with that, I can do it without it. For sure. And I've done it many times. I do it every day. And it just takes the power, the willpower. It's all about willpower. If you don't have the willpower to let's say get up and wash your ass, don't expect to smell clean. So it's the willpower for me, it doesn't
I don't care how good somebody dresses. Nicki Minaj could be walking through the door with a bag of Tina and a pipe, and I would still say no because of where I've come from and where I'm trying to go. You know? So, I just try to remember everything that has been taught to me. I recall my mother when she was in it. I recall my family. A lot of my family, older, suffered from substance abuse. I just try to remember the worst parts just to keep me away from that. And it's a struggle. Like last year, I struggled with doing like a little bit coke here and there, and I didn't look at it as a bad thing because I didn't still pick it up and was doing it. I just did it, going to the club or something. But I still don't even need that to go out. I'll get drunk as hell, but I don't want to feel like I need a strong drug, and so I would try to remind myself the things that I had learned along the way.
How I maintain my recovery is that I surrender every single day to my program of recovery. First and foremost to God. I make a conscious, concerted effort, and sometimes I fail, but my alarm is set on this phone, and so when I'm awoken at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning to turn off the alarm. The routine would be to get right onto my social media and start screening. Another way that my disease of addiction shows up. I'm compulsive with my social media. I'm always on it. What am I checking for? Give it a break. You're not missing anything. And so I have made a concerted effort now that before my head feet the ground to get up and go and pee, before I start scrolling on this social media, because that's probably the next thing I do, is to acknowledge God and to say, thank you for my life. Thank you for this day. Thank you for this moment. Thank you for allowing me to wake up instead of come to and see another day clean. And thank you for showing me a new way to live. So I acknowledge that stuff, before I go into my actual, when I'm more awake, my actual ritual of prayer. And so that's the first thing, Also, I mentioned, mind, body, and soul. So therapy, really, really important. Tonight, before this, I had therapy, my weekly Thursday appointment. Fitness for me is very much a part of my recovery, and so, I'm not working out when I'm using. I don't work out when I'm using, so fitness is very much a part of keeping this tempo. And for me, fitness is not just working out, but it's also trying to be conscious of what I eat, what I consume, positive affirmations, being very active, it's sort of in terms of service, and being open with my story. I share my story because I know someone else is gonna identify, and I know that there was a time when I didn't think that I could stop, and when I really thought that I could die. And so perhaps someone will hear my story and find identification. And I am somebody that there was a point in my life where I could not put 3 days together without some sort of substance, consuming some sort of mood or mind altering substance. And I'm not counting coffee, because if that's the case, then I have no clean time whatsoever. But but yeah, no. I know that somebody will hear this story, and as somebody that couldn't even put 3 clean days together, as I come up on 3 years, is absolutely, truly a miracle. But it is not unique. It's not unique to me. What's different this time is the complete and total surrender.
The cliche part, you would say one day at a time, one moment at a time. But a lot of people who are not even, have never been addicted to any substances, say they got to take life one day at a time anyway. It's kind of a smart way to go about it. Yes, doesn't mean you don't have future goals and aspirations. Planning, dreams, all those are necessary, but living in the moment. Not trying to live in the past, not trying to live in the future, because then I'm missing everything right now in the present, which is a gift. I know there's a little saying around that, but it's very true. Just keeping my line of communication open, knowing that at any given time, that could be me back to substance use. I say in my head it won't ever be, because I couldn't survive it now in this day and age, my health, my everything. The thought of it is grueling, and that's the good thing. When you think about it, to think, oh gosh, that struggle I could never take on, nor do I want to. There are times when you learn really what you wanted was not the drug, but you wanted the feeling that you got from it. You wanted the calm, the peace. Maybe you're overly anxious and you've never been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, but maybe you have been battling it your whole life and you didn't know. But you're definitely self-medicating something. So when I feel a certain way, it's not, oh, I wish I could use. Because I would think about, okay, I know I'd get up and I'd get my whole house purged out and packed up and ready to move when my apartment's available. I could probably do all that in 24 hours with a bag of heroin. Is that going to be my option? No. So I do it at my snail's pace, which doesn't make me happy, but I've got the rest of my life as long as I don't use, because there goes everything. My children are grown adults in their 30s. However, they're still my children. I wouldn't want to lose the relationship. But first and foremost, I know that I could not take care of me. And therefore, I could not be there for them or for anyone else in my life. So what I do is utilize all my tools, utilize my support, recognize my body when I'm feeling overly stressed. Maybe I need to check out a little. And that doesn't mean with a drug. It means go take a nap or take a nappy nap. It helps a lot of things. You wake up and you feel very differently. But just moving forward and knowing as long as I'm doing the best I can to live my healthy life, or as healthy as possible, that doesn't have to be an option that I resort to. It's in somewhat always a struggle, because whatever was there prior to the drug is still going to be there after you're not using it anymore. But getting the appropriate help you need. So if it is anxiety, talk to a professional. If it is depression, talk to a professional, as well as making sure that you include folks who understand what you're going through. So somebody with lived experience. It's so important to have folks in your lives who understand some of these things. We need a lot of people in our life. People who don't quite understand, but are there for you as a human being, but also folks who understand what you're going through. So my day-to-day life is just managing the best I can and doing the best I can for me. And knowing that will keep me from doing something that might have an immediate effect that I want, but will have long-term side effects of mainly death. Could be, a whole host of other things. So what my recovery process looks like is just trying to be the best human I can on a day-to-day basis.